Welcome to Power CEOs, the truth behind the business. I'm Jen Gaudet, your fearless host, entrepreneur, investor, and business strategist. Why are we here? Because I believe that iron sharpens iron, and when we bring successful entrepreneurs, investors, and executives to share what's working in business, and maybe even some of what's not, we're all able to learn and grow. As a result, our businesses grow, and the ripple effect impacts not only ourselves, our teams, and their families, but also our communities and our world. You are in for a treat today. I have a very special guest here for you. I have fielded so many questions about how do I know when's the right time to exit and what do I do after I exit my business, that I have brought the perfect individual to speak to you about exactly that. Today, we're going to talk about making the decision to exit, knowing when, how to sell, what to do, what's going to happen after, and everything in between. I would like to introduce to you Scott Mendell. He is the founder of Red Care Wellness.
Red Bear Care Wellness.
Red Bear Care Wellness. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thank you, ma'am. How are you today?
Fantastic. Scott, you have been through a couple of exits. A couple of times, one time you were forced to exit. You weren't anticipated it. And one time you chose to exit. Talk to me about what that was like. How did you choose to exit? What were the decision-making process? And we'll dive into the differences of your two experiences.
So when I was forced to exit was 2001. And if y'all remember 9/11, we had a customer base of about 6,000 people a week. And 9/11 happened and we had 100 people the next week. And a month later, we were at 150. And 6 months later, we were up to 1,000. And I was had blown through $500,000 and run every credit card I had up to the limit. Was not my choice to exit, but I could not afford to keep it open. And I kind of faced a decision of, do I pour more money into it to reinvigorate it, try and start it over again, or do I not? And I sat there one day in my bedroom, just sitting in bed thinking, and I was like, if I take that $500,000 and use it for anything I want to, what would I do? And the answer was not this. I had been burned. I didn't think that I could, at that moment in time, recreate a business that had been number one. And so I left, and it was horrible. For years and years and years, I felt like it was a failure. It took probably the better part of over a decade to finally look back and say, that was a really, really good business decision, was closing it and walking away.
Well, a lot of times we think if we just throw money at something, the problem will go away. But sometimes doing that, making that decision, making that call is the best decision. We see it in investing too. You're in an investment, it's not going well. Sometimes you cut your losses and just say, okay, this is one of the L's in my category.
Yeah, that's and that's how I looked at it for a long time. Is it was a loss. And again, after a few decades, I realized that it wasn't. I had zero control over the situation. It was a catastrophic event that changed the mindset in America, that eliminated, in fact, all of my competition at the time was also out of business within 2 years. And so now looking back, I can say not moving. In fact, I should have exited sooner. Had I done it on my own and made the choice, I might have felt better about it. I don't know. That's hindsight's 20/20. But looking back now, I made a phenomenally smart business decision under extreme pressure. And I think that simple question of, I've got the money, or I would have to borrow the money. And what would I do with it if I just had it? Right? If I just used it for whatever I wanted to do, would I do the same thing? And it took a little while to really justify that decision in my head that day. But I did come to the conclusion that moving forward and going in a different direction was really the smartest thing to do.
Well, in today's business climate, a lot of companies are facing a very similar decision.
Yep.
We've had years of inflation, costs have risen, margins have collapsed, and some business models are changing completely with the new technologies that are out. And so what advice do you have to business owners that are struggling? Because a lot of business owners, a lot of founders right now are finding themselves in that hard place.
Yeah, every day in the news, I read, there's another retail chain that closed, another fast food restaurant that closed, another business went down. And they're all being forced by the situation that either is a political climate or a monetary climate. Mm-hmm. And I guess the best advice is to really try and forward think. Look at, is it going to be possible to recover? What is it going to cost you to recover? How long can you ride that wave? Is there and granted, sometimes it takes a crystal ball. Like 9/11, I certainly didn't see that it changed the mindset in the country. Mm-hmm. And you just have to make your best guess. Like with inflation, how long is it going to last? Inflation is always a constant, but at a higher rate now and a lower rate next year, or a higher rate next year, depending on which guru you speak to. So making that decision is very, very difficult, and you have to justify it in your head and then live with it afterwards. And sometimes that's the hardest part. We all love our businesses. We feel very close to them. They're our babies. And sometimes when you have to walk away and abandon that wonderful thing you've built, it's traumatic. And you have to be able to live with that decision once you make it. But as I did, it's a chance. You don't know if it's going to be good, and you just cannot look back and say, well, if I had. Look at this company now, they're a huge success. But just because somebody else made a success doesn't mean that yours would have been or will be. So,
and they might have found it after the big turmoil and not had the debt load or any of the other things. So sometimes we just need to know in business when to hold them, when to fold them, and when to walk away. So now let's talk about the other side of it. You chose to exit the second go round.
Yeah, I did.
And so that is still deciding to sell, deciding to exit is still a huge decision.
It is.
How did you know it was the right time to exit?
Oddly enough, it's another catastrophic event. It was the pandemic. And I just kind of looked at what I was doing. I had just grown to really hate the people in my industry and hate the reputation of the industry. I was in real estate. Mm-hmm. And the reputation wasn't getting any better. The governing bodies were not acting like they should. And I had a dad to take care of who had gotten very sick, and which actually led me to Red Bear Care Wellness. And so for me, it was easy this time to say, okay, you know what, I'm done. I've got money in the bank. I'm not going to run it through the mill like I did last time. I've got a dad I need to take care of. He's got money, so that we can actually take care of him. I can quit my job. I can start a company that runs his care, and then be there 24/7 for him. He had a terrible disease called progressive supranuclear palsy, which we didn't learn for a couple of years after we started taking care of it. But for me, this time it was an easy choice because it was my dad. Mm-hmm. He couldn't be at home by himself anymore. And so trying to keep him mentally healthy, physically healthy, emotionally healthy was a 24/7 job. And for you family caregivers out there, do not try and do it by yourself. Mm-hmm. I did. I ended up in a nervous breakdown and started my company. And so if I can give you any hints on exiting, sometimes there's a really good reason. There's something that calls you to do something different. And for me, I was absolutely called to do what I'm doing now. It's something JT's not even sure about. So there are a lot of people that think I'm crazy, but Steve Jobs said it's the people that think they're crazy enough to change the world that often do.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Scott. And so both of your instances, I just want to kind of highlight this for the audience. Sometimes we don't have a choice when we exit. Sometimes we need to have a fire sale, and that's the absolute best thing to do. And other times we might have something that's happening either externally to us or within our own family. Maybe it's also that, hey, I've reached the peak of my career, like with you, Scott. You were seeing the turn of regulatory bodies. You were not liking what was happening in the industry. That's why I left medicine. I was not liking the way medicine was heading. I was not liking someone who was not medical telling me what I could and couldn't do, and then seeing reduced care. And so I made a very similar choice because of that. So whatever your reasoning is, the most important thing, the takeaway that I hear from Scott is don't look back, no what ifs, just make the decision based off of the information you have and what you feel called to do, and go forth. But don't look back with regrets, because life's too short for that. We do have to take a brief break, but I think we will dive deeper into this topic after these important messages.